Welcome to RonTape. The film begins in the Latin quarters of Los Angeles. A senior citizen named Frank Vega is on a bus journey to an undisclosed destination. Upon arrival at a stop, two hooligans enter the bus and begin to harass the other passengers. Frank reminisces about his youth, which he recalls as the most uncomplicated and joyous period of his life. As the only child of local farmers, he had a stunning girlfriend named Lindsay, whom he pledged to wed once he became self-sufficient. Honoring his commitment, he joined the army and was deployed to Vietnam for 10 years. During his service, he sustained injuries, requiring to return to the U.S. to undergo rehabilitation before attempting to resume his life. Regrettably, when he visited his girlfriend Lindsay, he discovered that she had already wed and had 2 offspring. Dejected, he moved forward with his life and attempted to join the police force, but his war injuries resulted in rejection. In addition, he struggled to secure a decent job as employers required a university degree and work experience. With limited options, he resorted to selling hot dogs on the street, but his business was undermined when a newer hot dog van attracted the majority of his customers. As a result, he spent the majority of his life in poverty. In the movie Returning to the Present, the 2 young troublemakers create a disturbance on the bus and physically assault an elderly man, but Frank steps in and confronts them. His bravery astounds the other passengers, and they upload a video of him fighting off the young thugs to social media. Overnight, Frank attains celebrity status almost instantly, and he is bestowed with the moniker Badass. Individuals begin to acknowledge him on the streets, and businesses begin to merchandise his t-shirts. Subsequently, Frank and his mother both interviewed journalists, and now he is respected by both the authorities and his community. He develops a friendship with a police officer named Marlock, who takes him on patrol from time to time. Sadly, 3 months later, Frank experiences another tragedy when his mother passes away. Following her funeral, he relocates to her home and extends an invitation to Klondike, Washington, a military friend, to reside with him. During their move, the old comrades pause for some drinks and reflect on their experiences during the Vietnam War, leading to the revelation that Klondike had once saved Frank's life. They also converse about their finances, with Klondike assuring him that their best days are still ahead of them. Later that day, Klondike hands Frank a pen drive and instructs him to store it in his late mother's safe. Klondike asserts that the contents of the drive possess the potential to make them wealthy, and departs to procure more alcohol. However, he is accosted by 2 delinquents named Terrence and Sebastian, who demand that he relinquish the flash drive. Klondike denies having the drive, but the assailants do not believe him, resulting in them shooting him and fleeing the scene. Frank becomes aware of his friend's homicide. The next day he receives notification from the police to identify his body. Once again, the killing is a reminder that it is unfeasible to reside. Although Mayor Williams has vowed to enhance, it remains unviable to reside in the neighborhood. The safety of the Latin quarters. That evening, Officer Marlock pays a visit to Frank's residence to invite him on patrol, but his 2 declines the offer, distraught over his friend's death. Marla consoles her friend and advises him to be patient, as the authorities may require more time to apprehend the perpetrators, given that there are more criminal cases than investigators. That night, Frank tunes into the news, where it is reported that 20 investigators the police worked tirelessly to solve the murder case of a white man within 24 hours in the same neighborhood. Frank senses that the authorities are not taking Klondike's death seriously due to his race. The next day, he visits the police station and accuses them of racial prejudice, but Detective Shaw refutes the allegations, sending him home and assuring him that the police are investigating Klondike's homicide. Nevertheless, Frank has lost all confidence in the system, and he chooses to take matters into his own hands. Subsequently, he conducts an investigation of the area where Klondike was killed, discovering a peculiar bullet casing and a necklace containing a photograph of a woman. Frank brings the bullet casing to a nearby pawn shop in an attempt to learn more, which proves fruitless. However, the shopkeeper identifies the woman in the photograph as someone from his church. He assumes that the necklace may belong to the woman's spouse, Terrence. Obtaining Terrence's residence, Frank races to his home. When the woman answers the door, she discloses that Terrence has not returned home in a week. Frank returns the locket to her and inquires about Terrence's whereabouts, to which she suggests he may be playing basketball with friends at a nearby park. Proceeds to the location and encounters a group of young men playing basketball, questioning them regarding Terrence's whereabouts. Unfortunately, the young men ridicule Frank and refuse to disclose any information, prompting Frank to confront them single-handedly, defeating them in combat. Following their defeat, the young men finally divulge the details. Although they assert that they are unaware of Terrence's location, they do suggest that Ronaldo may possess information. It transpires that Terrence and Ronaldo are close friends. In the subsequent sequence, Frank proceeds to Ronaldo's residence and encounters his roommate, who instructs him to a tavern on the other side of town that Ronaldo frequents. The scene then transitions to an undercover meeting between a gangster known as Panther and Major Williams, the mayor of Los Angeles. As it happens, Panther is the head of Terrence and Sebastian, and he dispatched them Klondike to obtain the flash drive. Supposedly, the flash drive comprises damning evidence of the mayor's misconduct and other depravities. Mayor Williams is apprehensive about being exposed since he is slated to run for re-election in 90 days. He rebukes Panther for dispatching inexperienced henchmen and warns him that he will be implicated as well. In the event that his secrets become public knowledge, Frank arrives back at his residence and witnesses the neighboring couple quarreling loudly on the street. Evidently, the husband physically assaulted his wife, Amber, and following his departure, Frank introduces himself to her and takes her and her son Martin to his home to tend to her injuries. Amber expresses her appreciation and extends an invitation to prepare a meal for him someday. The next day, Frank goes to the bar to find Ronaldo and is met with a group of aggressive bargoers who attempt to attack him. A prolonged brawl ensues, and Frank eventually locates Ronaldo. Ronaldo tries to fight back, but Frank overpowers him and hangs him upside down from the balcony. He then coerces Ronaldo into disclosing Terrence's location, and eventually learns that he's living with his girlfriend Tatiana, a massage parlor employee. When Frank reaches home, one of the Panther's henchmen attacks him and demands the flash drive. Initially overpowered, Frank eventually gains control and drives the thug away. He then becomes curious about the flash drive and seeks the help of his young neighbor, Martin, to retrieve the information stored on it. After researching, he discovers that the flash drive contains information about a secret project drill an oil well in the neighborhood commissioned by Major Williams. That evening, Frank visits Tatiana's massage parlor and schedules a session with her. He tries asking her about Terrence, but she refuses to divulge any information. Frank then decides to follow her home and finally confronts Terrence in her bedroom, attacking him for killing his best friend. Once the culprit is subdued, Frank uses force to extract information about the person who ordered Klondike's murder. When Terrence remains uncooperative, Frank threatens him by placing his hands on the sharp blades of the food waste disposer, injuring him. Finally, Terrence reveals that Klondike was killed by Sebastian on the orders of Panther. Frank hears his neighbors arguing again and rushes into their house, where he sees Martin's father physically assaulting Amber. Frank intervenes in the quarrel and warns Amber's husband to leave her alone or face consequences. The man underestimates Frank, but he eventually backs down and leaves. After the commotion settles, Amber shows appreciation towards Frank and invites him for dinner later. He accepts and goes home to spruce up before returning to Amber's house dressed smartly and smelling fresh. They then enjoy a pleasant dinner together. As Martin is not at home, Frank thanks her for the food and asks her if he could keep a matchbook of hers as a memento. Soon, the atmosphere turns romantic and the two share a kiss. But their intimate moment is suddenly interrupted by the return of Martin. Frank then offers for them to spend the night at his house, promising to fix their damaged door the next day. Later, Frank hands the flash drive to Officer Marlock before heading to Panther's hideout. Frank accuses Panther of murdering his friend, and the gangster discloses that Klondike was previously in his employ. However, one day, he suddenly decided to quit and betray the organization by stealing Major Williams' important flash drive. Panther demands Frank give up the flash drive, but he refuses, leading to Panther and his goons attacking him. They tie him up to an electrocution device and subject him to increasing levels of shocks, causing him pain. However, when Frank proves resilient to the shocks, Panther commands his goons to increase the voltage to the highest level, typically used for creatures like African bush elephants and Siberian moose. Frank screams in agony, but even after that, he still refuses to divulge the flash drive's location. Panther takes his wallet and discovers Frank's address, hoping to find it there. The gangster instructs his henchmen to persist in torturing Frank while he gets ready to depart. However, Frank miraculously breaks free, and he ignites the oil drums in the warehouse using the matchbox from Amber, causing a massive explosion. The blazing fire and the resulting explosion throw the goons off balance, and taking advantage of the chaos, Frank pummels Panther relentlessly. However, the gangster retrieves an antique kukri and wounds Frank before escaping. Despite this setback, he manages to recover quickly and pursues Panther, who attempts to flee by stealing a bus. In response, Frank borrows a bus from a kind stranger and sets off in hot pursuit. They embark on a protracted chase, causing significant destruction to other vehicles en route, culminating in the eventual crashing of their buses. Panther proceeds towards Frank's residence, while Frank coincidentally encounters the two troublemakers he had previously defeated on the bus during the course of the film. Intent on seeking retribution for their prior embarrassment, the duo begins to assault him and endeavor to capture the entire ordeal. Nonetheless, Frank manages to subdue and vanquish them before continuing his pursuit. Upon arriving at Frank's residence, Panther locates Amber and demands the flash drive from her, menacingly warning of dire consequences should she refuse to comply. Thankfully, Frank arrives just in the nick of time and rescues her once more. The pair then proceed to engage in another altercation, culminating in a confrontation in the front yard. At that moment, Panther launches an assault on Frank, only for Amber to intercede by seizing him from behind and immobilizing. This affords Frank the opening to rise to his feet and triumph over him. In the concluding sequence, the police finally make their appearance and take the criminal into custody, while Mayor Williams is also unmasked and subsequently apprehended by the police. The film concludes with Frank, Amber, and Martin living blissfully ever after.